sharp as glass, still echoed in my ears, cutting through the celebratory din of the ballroom. A full week had passed since my 32nd birthday gala, yet the sting hadn't dulled one bit. Eleanor, bless her heart, or perhaps not, had leaned in, her voice a low, theatrical murmur meant only for me, and delivered the knockout blow. "Sweetheart," she'd purred, "you're just not cut out for this grand life. You'll eventually falter, mark my words. It's simply not in your stars." My entire being felt like a tight knot after that. I, Scarlett Jones, ostensibly celebrating a significant milestone, felt deflated, as if the air had hissed out of me like a pop balloon. I'd spent months, years even, building toward this moment, this level of professional acknowledgement. And then Eleanor, my mother's sister, had just, poof, all of it erased. The smiles, the clinking glasses, the jazz band's smooth riffs, it all blurred into a meaningless tableau. I remember staring at the shimmering chandeliers, their crystal facets mocking my sudden internal gloom. How could someone, especially family, lob such a grenade into what was meant to be a joyful night? What really grated was the timing. My career had finally hit a stride. After grinding through those early years post-Georgia Tech, buried under student loan debt and the constant pressure to make something of myself, things were looking up. I joined this organization, a specialized consulting firm that often worked with government agencies, and I was on the cusp of a major promotion. This gala, ostensibly for my birthday, was also a subtle nod to my rising status within the company. Everyone who mattered, or so I thought, was there. And then, Eleanor, with her perfectly coiffed silver bob and that knowing smirk. Just had to drop her little prophecy of doom. A wave of intense irritation washed over me, a familiar companion these days. My phone, lying face down on the nightstand, felt heavy, a portal to a world I wasn't quite ready to face again. Social media was probably buzzing with pictures from the gala, all filtered smiles and posed perfection. None of it capturing the icy dread that had settled in my gut right after Eleanor's pronouncement. It wasn't just a casual jab. It was steeped in a long history of her subtle and not so subtle undermining. Since I was a kid, she'd always been the one to point out my flaws, to hint that my ambitions were too grand, my dreams too lofty for a girl from our background. She never saw the grit, only the potential for collapse. A part of me wanted to scream, to lash out at the unfairness of it all. Another part, the part that had been carefully constructed over years of therapy and self-talk, urged calm. Don't let her live rent-free in your head, Scarlett. Yet, the words stuck, festering. You'll eventually falter. It was a seed of doubt she'd planted, and it was threatening to sprout into a thorny bush, right there in the middle of my mental garden. The gala, a supposed celebration of my ascent, had instead become a stark reminder of the long shadow Eleanor cast. I couldn't shake the feeling that her words were a curse, waiting to manifest. The air in my apartment felt thick, heavy with unspoken anxieties. I needed a clear head, but all I could hear was that chilling prediction, echoing, making every next step feel like a treacherous tightrope walk. Reflecting on those words, my mind drifted back. What came to mind was not a sweet memory, but a series of small, almost imperceptible shifts. It's a subtle discord, like a slightly off-key note in an otherwise pretty song. Eleanor wasn't just a friend, but my mother's sister, my aunt, a constant presence woven into the fabric of our lives. Her tendency to point out my flaws, to highlight every perceived shortcoming, had begun early in my childhood. A vivid scene resurfaced from when I was perhaps 8. We were at my grandmother's house, drawing. I remember painstakingly coloring a vibrant rainbow, feeling immensely proud of my careful lines. Eleanor, already a teenager, glanced over. Her expression wasn't unkind, not exactly. She simply observed, "Your yellow is a little messy there, Scarlett. Looks like a bumblebee threw up." The comment, delivered with a casual shrug, made my small triumph shrivel. I crumpled the paper. It wasn't a grand, dramatic moment, just one of countless tiny pinpricks that slowly deflated my confidence. My parents, busy with their own adult conversations in the next room, never noticed these subtle interactions. They saw Eleanor as a sweet, helpful older girl, completely oblivious to the quiet erosion happening right under their noses. Another memory surfaces, this one from my high school years. I'd poured my heart into an essay for a creative writing competition, convinced it was my best work yet. I'd even let Eleanor read it, seeking her approval. She read it, then slowly handed it back, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. It's ambitious, Scarlett. Very ambitious. But sometimes it's better to just stick to what you're good at, right? Don't reach too far. That quiet suggestion, barely a criticism on the surface, felt like a heavy weight. I pulled the essay, convinced it wasn't good enough, and never submitted it. The truth is, I'd been so close to genuinely believing in my own talent. Instead, I retreated, choosing safer, less exposed paths for years afterwards. A certain feeling of abandonment started to creep in during those formative years. While other girls had mentors, or at least cheerleaders in their older female figures, my experience felt different. It was less about active sabotage and more about a consistent, low-level dampening. Any time I expressed a big dream, becoming an architect, living abroad, starting my own business, Eleanor's reaction was invariably a dismissive chuckle, or a practical, almost condescending, "Oh, honey, that's a nice thought. But how hard that actually is, right? Real life isn't a movie." Her words weren't direct attacks, but rather insidious little warnings, designed to clip my wings before I even attempted to fly. One particular instance, right before I left for college, stands out with excruciating clarity now. I was bubbling with excitement, talking about my chosen major, how I envisioned my future. She simply nodded, a distant look in her eyes. Then, with a sigh that felt loaded with unspoken pity, she patted my arm. "You're so earnest, Scarlett. So full of hope. It's almost sweet." That gesture, that phrase, a seemingly innocuous sentiment, now feels like a deep, silent wound. It wasn't encouragement. It was a prediction of my eventual disillusionment, wrapped in a thin veneer of affection. I just didn't see it then. A strange quiet had settled over my Atlanta apartment, heavier than the usual city hum. Not the peaceful kind, more like the hush before a storm, or the dead air in a room after someone has just delivered a cutting remark. My 32nd birthday celebration, the fancy downtown event, now felt like a distant, distorted memory, its glitter replaced by a dull ache in my chest. The promotion, the one I'd been striving for with every fiber of my being, shimmered just beyond my grasp, yet the excitement surrounding it had curdled. Every morning, the reflection in my bathroom mirror seemed to hold a question I couldn't articulate. My usual vibrant energy had diminished, replaced by a low thrum of apprehension. I noticed little things, details that would typically go unnoticed. The way the light hit my favorite framed print, for instance, seemed off. My desk, usually a testament to organized chaos, now appeared too neat. Someone, almost certainly Chloe, had evidently tidied it, aligning my pens with military precision, stacking my professional journals in perfect columns. This particular morning, as I brewed my coffee, I found a small decorative ceramic plate on my bedside table. It displayed a quaint, slightly cheesy inspirational quote about reaching for the stars. Chloe had placed it there. She meant well, I knew, always trying to inject cheerfulness where she perceived a lack. Yet, gazing at that plate, a prickle of unease ran along my spine. It felt like a visual commentary, a subtle prod, almost as if she believed I needed constant reminding to aim higher, to not give up, perhaps even implying I was on the verge of doing exactly that. Later that afternoon, while reviewing project briefs for the new unit, a wave of profound disconnection washed over me. My apartment, the space I'd meticulously curated over years, a sanctuary from the outside world, suddenly felt foreign. The scent of my favorite candle, usually so comforting, now seemed cloying. The familiar pattern of sunlight on the rug, a sight that usually brought a sense of peace, appeared stark, almost clinical. I paced from the living room to the kitchen, then back again, a restless sensation building within me. It was as if the air itself had grown thin, making it difficult to fully inhale. The very idea of my upcoming career advancement, once a source of immense pride, now carried an unsettling weight. My mind kept replaying the scene at the celebration. Not just the cruel pronouncement about my future, but the preceding conversations. The seemingly innocuous remarks that now, in retrospect, carried a different resonance. I recalled how Eleanor had casually inquired about the details of my promotion, the scope of the new responsibilities, her eyes lingering just a moment too long on my face. She'd asked about my travel schedule, my potential team members, every query disguised as innocent interest. A disquieting awareness began to dawn. My sister Chloe's actions, those little helpful interventions, might not be entirely her own initiative. Chloe was easily influenced, especially by stronger personalities within our family. My gut tightened. This unsettling feeling, this creeping sense of being watched, analyzed, and quietly sabotaged, it wasn't just in my head. It extended beyond the mere memory of a harsh comment. Something was being orchestrated, a quiet campaign of doubt, and it had begun to infiltrate the very fabric of my everyday existence. The walls of my own home seemed to close in. No longer a refuge, but a stage where unseen forces played out a narrative I was only just beginning to decipher. A chilling thought, one I still couldn't bring myself to speak aloud, formed in my mind. What if the real challenge wasn't proving my worth to the new unit, but protecting my own space, my own sanity, from those closest to me? This unsettling feeling, this creeping sense of being watched, analyzed, and quietly sabotaged, intensified, manifesting daily in our shared living space. Each morning, the ritual of making coffee, once a comforting start to the day, became a loaded exercise. The clatter of mugs, the too loud whir of the grinder, every sound seemed amplified, an echo of the unspoken tension that now permeated our apartment. I'd glance up, expecting to catch Chloe's eye, to find some hint of what was truly going on. But her gaze would be fixed on her phone, a blank screen reflecting her impassive face. Our apartment, previously a sanctuary of sisterly banter and shared Netflix binges, now felt like enemy territory. The worn armchair where I'd unwind now seemed to judge me. The kitchen island where we'd cook together felt like a barrier. I'd find myself walking on eggshells, my movements hushed, trying not to disturb the fragile peace that threatened to shatter at any moment. Social media, usually a mindless scroll, became another source of scrutiny. Did Chloe's vague posts, always just a little too cryptic, refer to me? Were her online comments, seemingly innocuous, veiled critiques? My mind raced, trying to decipher a secret code in her digital footprint. A new form of communication had emerged between us. Silence. Her texts, once full of emojis and enthusiastic chatter, had shrunk to clipped one-word replies. When I tried to initiate a conversation, asking about her day or plans, her responses were short, almost dismissive. A wall had risen between us, constructed brick by brick from avoided eye contact and emotional distance. It was a silence that screamed louder than any argument, a deliberate withholding that gnawed at my composure. I craved the straightforwardness of a disagreement, anything to break this suffocating quiet. One evening, unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere any longer, I attempted to breach the divide. "Chloe," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "Is everything all right? It just feels different around here lately." She paused her scrolling, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Different how, Scarlett?" she replied, her tone flat, devoid of genuine curiosity. "Like, after the gala," I pressed on, choosing my remarks carefully. "Your comment about my career path, it's been on my mind." She shrugged, returning her attention to her phone. "Oh, that? I was just trying to be realistic. look before you leap and all that. It wasn't a big deal. Her casual dismissal was like a physical blow. She made me feel foolish for even bringing it up, as if my unease was a fabrication, an overreaction. My discomfort was not only ignored but invalidated, a gaslighting so subtle I almost questioned my own perception. Later that night, the weight of her indifference pressed down. I stood before the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. My eyes, usually bright, appeared dull, tinged with a weariness that went beyond simple fatigue. My lips trembled, and a stifled sob caught in my throat, threatening to erupt. I swallowed it back, forcing a shaky breath. Reaching for my phone, I typed out a lengthy message to a friend, detailing the suffocating tension, the constant apprehension, the deep ache of being dismissed by my own sister. My fingers hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then, with a sigh that emptied my lungs, I deleted every single character. What was the point? It seemed no amount of articulation could truly capture the invisible pain she inflicted. The pervasive quiet in my apartment, which had lately draped me like a heavy cloak, transformed into a suffocating shroud. My suspicions regarding Chloe's true intentions, previously a nagging whisper, solidified into a dreadful, undeniable certainty. The stark truth arrived not with a dramatic flourish, but through the mundane glow of my phone screen. An unexpected, brutal flash of reality that stole my breath. I had been scrolling through old photos one evening, seeking a fleeting distraction from the gnawing unease that had taken root in my chest. A sudden ping from a group chat I rarely checked. It was a message from Sarah, an old college acquaintance, a casual screenshot intended for an entirely different conversation. My gaze landed upon the image, and the entire world tilted on its axis. The screenshot captured a private message exchange. The sender, Chloe. The recipient, someone I didn't immediately recognize, yet the context quickly became chillingly, sickeningly clear. Chloe's digital statements weren't just careless gossip or typical sibling rivalry. They were precise, calculated jabs at my professional standing, veiled suggestions that my ambition significantly outstripped my actual capabilities, that I lacked the strategic mind truly required for leadership roles. She had been actively disseminating these doubts, not merely hinting at them in my presence. One particular message contained a phrase about making absolutely certain the appropriate individuals heard about Scarlett's overenthusiasm before she became too confident for her own good. A profound shock seized my entire frame. My breath hitched, a sharp, ragged sound, as if my lungs had forgotten how to function. The screen blurred before my vision, yet the awful clarity of those sentences burned themselves into the very fabric of my memory. This wasn't some misinterpretation on my part, a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't her usual passive-aggressive banter, the kind I'd learned to deflect. This was a deliberate, meticulously planned campaign, expressly designed to undermine my professional trajectory. It represented an assault, not just on my career aspirations, but on my inherent character, my reputation, everything I had meticulously built. An intense heat spread through my core, not a blush of embarrassment, but a searing blaze of indignity and righteous anger. My stomach churned violently, a knot of pure revulsion tightening with each passing second. The notion that my own sister, a person with whom I had shared a lifetime of moments, had engaged in such insidious sabotage, left me absolutely reeling. The casual way she articulated her malicious intent, as if discussing the weather or a trivial shopping list, conveyed an appalling, unfathomable lack of conscience. A cold resolve began to solidify within me, hardening the tumultuous feelings that had raged since the birthday celebration. I found myself navigating the next few days in a strange, detached way, almost like watching a movie of my own life unfold. My initial surge of indignation started morphing into something more pragmatic, a quiet determination to regain agency. It wasn't an easy pivot, not when years of conditioning had me constantly seeking approval, especially from family. First, I cleaned house, digitally speaking. Chloe's presence on my social media accounts had always been a source of anxiety, a platform for her veiled criticisms or oddly timed comments. As I scrolled through my friends list, my thumb hovered. Then, with a deliberate exhale, I tapped unfollow next to her name, followed by remove friend. This digital severance felt like a physical weight unburdening my chest. I didn't announce it, didn't make a public statement. It was a silent, private act of self-preservation. Next, I found the mute button for our family group chat, a constant cacophony of trivial updates and thinly veiled competitive boasts. No more notifications, no more instant access to that draining noise. Each click, each quiet decision to disengage, felt like a small victory against the lingering apprehension that had always shadowed me. I still caught myself flinching when my phone buzzed, my mind instantly anticipating a text or call from her, another subtle reminder of her pervasive presence. That old fear, a familiar companion from my younger years, hadn't vanished completely. Instead, it slowly receded, replaced by a burgeoning sense of quiet strength. It was as if I was learning to walk again. But this time, I was firmly on my own 2 feet, choosing my own direction. My daily rhythm shifted almost imperceptibly at first. Where I once might have eagerly shared a professional win or a funny anecdote from work with Chloe, now I kept these moments to myself. Information, I realized, was a currency I no longer wished to spend on her. When my mother inevitably asked about Chloe's latest news, I'd offer a non-committal hum, skillfully redirecting the conversation. I was consciously choosing what to disclose and to whom. It dawned on me the sheer emotional labor I'd expended trying to maintain the illusion of a normal sisterly connection, a connection that had always felt profoundly lopsided and draining. This newfound discretion felt like carefully building a protective wall around my most cherished experiences, my deepest aspirations. Someone, predictably, noticed the shift. A few days later, a text appeared on my screen, not from Chloe directly, but from our cousin, a casual query asking if everything was okay, followed by a pointed mention that Chloe had wondered why I hadn't responded to her last text. An initial wave of unease rippled through me, a familiar tightening in my chest. But I quickly steadied myself. I typed a simple neutral reply, something about being busy, about needing a bit of space. It wasn't a lie. I was indeed intensely busy reclaiming my own headspace. The subtle tension in the family air thickened, becoming almost palpable. Chloe's calls, which I'd previously let ring out or answered with a sigh of reluctant obligation, now went straight to voicemail without a second thought. Her texts remained unread in my notification bar, a quiet, stubborn testament to my new policy. This wasn't fueled by vengeance. It was about the fundamental act of defining the inviolable boundaries of my personal space, my emotional well-being. The unease was real, a constant hum just beneath the surface, but it was a fundamentally different kind of discomfort than before. This one felt deliberate, purposeful. One evening, after a particularly draining day at work, my phone lit up with Chloe's name. My thumb hovered over the screen, poised. Old habits tugged, the ingrained need to appease, to avoid conflict, to maintain the fragile peace. But then, a flicker of that righteous anger, now tempered into steely resolve, resurfaced. It was her pronouncement at my gala. I'd fail. The memory hit me like a sudden icy wave, stripping away any lingering hesitation. My finger didn't swipe to answer. Instead, with a deliberate motion, I tapped her contact, scrolled down, and selected block this caller. The screen confirmed my action, a decisive finality that brought a profound, releasing exhale. No explanation, no drama, just a silent, firm assertion of my newfound peace. A profound calm settled over me in the weeks following my birthday celebration, slowly but surely replacing the ceaseless turmoil that had churned within. The stark contrast between the two recent announcements, Chloe's cruel prediction of my downfall and the Colonel's unexpected declaration of my leadership role, had somehow forged an odd, yet intensely powerful clarity. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but rather the slow, steady clearing of a dense fog after a long, dark night. For so long, Chloe's insidious commentary, her subtle digs and backhanded compliments, had burrowed deep into my psyche, planting insidious seeds of doubt. They had been like a constant, chilling undercurrent, insidiously shaping my view of myself, making me question every success, every bold step I dared to take. What truly resonated with me, once the initial shock and emotion of the gala had faded, was the stark difference in impact. Chloe's pronouncements, once capable of shattering my confidence with a single, careless word, now seemed to merely glance off, leaving only a superficial sting, a momentary flicker of the old hurt. The Colonel's words, however, had landed with the undeniable weight of truth and the gravitas of earned recognition. That profound distinction, the chasm between a sister's negativity steeped in insecurity and an esteemed professional's genuine affirmation, became my unwavering anchor. It wasn't about seeking external validation anymore. It was about finally recognizing where true validation resided, and it certainly wasn't lurking in the manipulative shadows of someone else's unresolved insecurity. My focus shifted dramatically. The new unit demanded my complete and unwavering attention, and I plunged into the work with an almost boundless energy I hadn't known I possessed. There were long nights, intricate problem-solving sessions, and the immense responsibility of guiding a team through uncharted territory. Each challenge met, each small victory achieved, reinforced a deepening sense of my own capability. This wasn't just a job. It was a crucible, relentlessly forging a stronger, more resilient Scarlett. The old anxieties, the nagging need to constantly prove myself to some invisible, critical audience, began to dissipate. My sense of self-worth became intrinsically linked to my actions, my competence, and the genuine trust I built with my colleagues. Regarding Chloe, a quiet, almost dispassionate understanding finally took hold. Her behavior, which had once consumed my thoughts with a torturous mix of hurt and confusion, now appeared through an entirely different lens. It wasn't personal, not truly. It was, I realized with a profound clarity, a raw reflection of her own struggles, a desperate, misguided attempt to elevate herself by diminishing others. This realization brought no anger, no burning desire for retribution, only a quiet, almost melancholic acceptance. The girl who, at perhaps 8 years old, had meticulously pointed out every stray crayon mark on my carefully colored drawing, was still there, perpetually trapped in a painful cycle of comparison and envy. There were moments, fleeting ones, when a sharp pang of longing for a different sisterly bond would surface within me. A genuine connection, mutual support, laughter untainted by any hidden edge. But those wistful moments quickly passed, replaced by the sober certainty that such a bond wasn't available from Chloe. Not yet, and perhaps never would be. It was a truly painful truth to acknowledge, akin to mourning something that had never, in reality, truly existed. Yet, paradoxically, releasing that deeply held expectation brought its own quiet, profound kind of peace. My personal space, my Atlanta apartment, which had been filled with a heavy, anticipatory stillness for so long, now buzzed with a vibrant, different kind of energy. It truly was my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe deeply, think clearly, and simply be myself, unburdened. The incessant need to constantly explain myself, to justify my aspirations or decisions, had simply vanished. I was leading a complex unit, navigating intricate challenges, and genuinely thriving. My chosen major, once so easily dismissed by Chloe, was now the robust foundation of a promising, fulfilling career. The girl who had once bubbled with excitement about her future, before Chloe's dismissive remarks had clipped her spirit, had finally, undeniably, arrived. One evening, after putting in another long day, I picked up my phone. A new message notification from Chloe popped up. Something mundane, A casual query asking if I'd seen a particular show. My thumb hovered, not with the old indecision or trepidation, but with a quiet, unwavering certainty. There was no longer any pull, no lingering obligation to respond, no phantom fear of conflict. The screen remained lit for a moment, the message unread, a silent echo of a connection that no longer served me. My thumb then moved deliberately, not to open the message, but to select her contact. Without a second thought, I tapped the block option. The digital tether, which had represented so much unspoken tension, so much convoluted history, was finally, irrevocably severed. A profound sense of finality, devoid of anger but imbued with resolute peace, washed over me. The screen went dark, and I placed the phone face down, truly ready to, finally, completely move on.